Okay, that was my good friend Michael Donahoe playing Rondo alla Turca by Mozart, a guitar arrangement he did. To get the brain, Mozart is great for the brain, I think. It's these. Anyways, yes, Stradio. He's got I guess just a self-released album. On that page, if I can get to my chat. How do I get to my chat? Oh, there it is. Okay. Shit, y'all been here the whole time. I ain't seen nothing. Xenu. This video starts like that. All right. Yeah, I didn't even see the chat window because I had the question posted. I'm just gonna drag this over here to find it real quick. Where is the chat tab? Lulu barking. I don't see the damn chat tab. Okay. Fundamental Attribution Error. This ought to be a good one. Lulu is won't stop barking. It's gonna get Cynthia up here in a minute. Good morning, Xenu. Good morning, Juliana Mock. Yep. Mind my blues. Good afternoon. Yeah, Mozart was totally punk rock. Holy shit, yes. Yeah, if there was a punk rock dude at that time, yeah. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? There's nothing new under the sun. If you think you're doing something original, and that's not to be a downer or anything. It's just that, humans have been around a long time. Yeah, so I've got some pages pulled up here on fundamental attribution error. And this is going to be difficult if it's early in the morning. I know I was kind of struggling, but I'll get through it. This is a 20-minute video I did in 2017, and I talked to my friend that I grew up with in the farmland there in southern, 20 miles from the Gulf, A1 ag land. We were little explorers. Like, I had a pretty picturesque childhood when it comes to leave the house in the morning and don't come back till the evening on the weekends. And if Mama rang that triangle bell, you better get your butt home. Around this time, I already see the exhaustion on my face. My childhood friend's brother assaulted my friend, and my friend called me from the hospital at like 2 a.m. and walked out of the hospital. I don't know how he got out of the hospital, because he was using the IV roller as a guide to get out. His brother had beaten him so badly that his face was swollen, his eyes were swollen shut. Later that night, his brother, 2 days later, it was a long night, shot himself, and was in critical care for probably 5-6 weeks, and then died. It was horribly tragic, and this was going on, along with everything else that I've talked about. So it sort of a perfect storm. But I'm leaving myself these little breadcrumbs. Fundamental attribution error, because someone else pointed it out. Kaivago, whatever the username is now, I forget. Kaivago said, check these out. These will help you. So, this is a follow-up again on Kaivago's history lesson. Fundamental attribution error. I just want to say, in doing these videos and studying psychology, that I am not at all qualified to give expert opinions on this subject matter. All I'm doing is going over the information, relating it however I can to Scientology. That's all. So, fundamental attribution error, the example they give in the Wikipedia page is you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, and you say, "Oh, that asshole! He must be a jerk because he pulled in front of you." Not a nice thing to do. That is fundamental attribution error, because the presumptions, because there's a presumption there that because he cut you off, he's an asshole. But there are, possibly infinite number of variables that could have caused him to pull in front of you. For instance, he may have been going to the hospital because his son or daughter was being delivered, and he was in a big hurry. I mean, I've done that. When my son was born, and when my daughter was born, I drove real fast several times to the Goche campus, and I'm sure people were like, "That guy's a dick." But I had a pregnant wife in the car, and she was in a lot of pain, and
and scared, really scared. So that's fundamental attribution error. So my thoughts on that relating to Scientology are that the biggest one is that Scientologists are stupid, because I see it I've seen it all over the internet. I've even seen it on Scientologists.
Early on, I would even get comments on my videos like, well, this is a good video, but the fact that you were even involved just, invalidates your perspective. And, I would never be so stupid to fall for such a stupid thing. Stuff like that. No problem, Juliana. No problem at all. You're welcome anytime. Yeah, the sentiment seemed to be, I don't know, like these days public sentiment seems to be like, oh wow, yeah, like this is happening to people, good people, they get sucked in. But to me that seems like a more recent change after the remedies, the aftermath, the exposure to what is done, how is done, or even just the what, not even necessarily the how, has created some, I don't know if you call it empathy or just understanding of the issue, that being a Scientologist doesn't make you dumb any more than being a Catholic makes you dumb, or a Jewish person makes you dumb. Einstein was Jewish. Infinite examples throughout time. So, I do remember getting comments. Maybe it was OSA. Maybe it was just people who thought they were smarter than everyone else.
Like ex-Scientologist forums, where people who are allowed to be part of the forum that aren't Scientologists, or who weren't Scientologists, never were. They call them never ends.
Ah, never ends. Yeah. So in the ESMB board, many never ends, would be interested in the subject, come in and kind of, read a little, and then be like, I never do that. Oh, that's so fucked up. Oh, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you let them do that. Meanwhile, there's a trauma community, and they're trying to connect. And it was kind of distracting. And there's not a lot of moderation, really. So people would come and go. Yeah. I mean, as a user, I don't think Chris Shelton was ever a moderator. But as a user, he did a pretty good job of de-escalation, or, and there were other people too, for sure. Because I remember after I made my first post, someone said some really snide comment, and one of the members that had been a member for a long time was like, hey, take it easy on the newbie. Did I make a song for him after it happened? It's still pretty fresh. That was 2017, and my friend, who you're asking about, and our little brother, there's still a lot of things that grief is a lifelong process, and his mother just died, and there's an estate issue with the kids, and it's just a mess. So, this is one thing after another, and so, no. Short answer, no. I haven't really written a song about it, but and generally, you know, it would make a good song though. You know, Adrian was, you know, raised one way, but you know, there's Miss Elaine and that family that she comes from the Creole parishes. And if you saw Adrian, my little brother that died, like he just looked like a reformed, badass Indian brave. I mean, Kashada Nation, but not recognized. So, incredibly strong, incredibly, like the amount of work that he could get done was insane. He was a builder, a welder. He worked on cars. Like, I mean, anything. I've seen him lift up the back of vehicles. It's crazy. Look at that face. That looks like my eyeball is going cross-eyed there. So, fundamental attribution error. This is the Wikipedia. There's multiple. I did figure out how to change the pages. Bow, 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 bow. Social psychology. Fundamental attribution error, also known as correspondence bias or attribution effect. This is just to say that things get attributed. It is a cognitive cognitive attribution bias where observers underemphasize situational and environmental factors for the behavior of a person or actor while overemphasizing dispositional or personality factors. In other words, observers tend to over-attribute the behaviors of others to their personality. For example, he's late because he's selfish, and under-attribute them to the situation or context. Exempli gratifi. He is late because he got stuck in traffic. Although personality traits and their predispositions are considered to be observable facts in psychology, the fundamental attribution error is an error because it misinterprets their effects. It misinterprets the effects of observable facts. All right. All right. So I said something about driving in a car, someone cutting you off. You may say, that freaking asshole. And they may be. That might be why. But it is, you don't know. So it is an error. It's just a miscalculation. That person might be, as I said in the video, someone with a pregnant woman in the back, ready to go into labor. And so that changes the it's a bias, another bias.
So the never ends sometimes will post things like, I can't believe you're so stupid, or they usually get moderated very quickly, but they pop up in other places too, like on Operation Clambake, which was a big turn.
Again, I want to just really stress that this was 2017. This is not the never ends now. This was the never ends then. So I'm not saying that any of the never ends are going into ESMB forums and giving former trauma survivors a hard time. This is not what is happening now. Just great.
For me, initially, I avoided that website. I only went to it for the
hey,
materials because there's a lot of hate.
What's up, Beach?
Attributed to anyone having been a Scientologist, because how could you be so stupid? And believe me, you do feel stupid after you've come to the realization that it's all a money thing. It's all a money scam. and you actually believed in it. But I'll also say that as far as people in Scientology being stupid.
Yeah, Mock said, I was horrified how little empathy people had sometimes in a country that should understand coercive control well enough. Well, that's a damn fine point because, after World War II, the United States government and other governments in the world wanted access and control over some senior, German. I don't know what you'd call them, doctors, human experimentation, and this information was definitely, as we'll find out, 1958 fundamental attribution error was identified. And they wanted, you're right, they should understand coercive control more than well enough, really, because they extracted war criminals, in some cases, granting them citizenship in their own country in order to further their own research on the subject. Right? Mind My Blues, it's fascinating how quickly humans can forget and ignore. Yeah, sometimes you have to. What if you're in an extreme situation like the Holocaust victims? Some of them, everyone's different. Some of them react completely differently. There's a woman who went to a trial of a 90-something-year-old guard at a camp over in Germany. They had, prosecuted him for whatever it was, and she wanted to go in support of him because she had not forgotten and not ignored. In fact, the opposite of ignored, because she was on the diametrically opposed side of the conflict and was a victim as a child, her showing support of this person, and it wasn't that she didn't want him to get, it wasn't that she wanted everyone to know what he did, and she entrusted the court to do what was right, but it went in a sort of not necessarily protest, but to advocate for this man's life, because he has had to live with what he did for 50 years, and in the trial he said that he deeply regretted it. And Xenu says, I agree with Mock. I didn't think you were saying that I didn't feel it applied to me personally in Theta. Not super sure. Yes, I got up early, Cynthia, and I hear the dog woke you up. I'm assuming the dog woke you up. Yeah, but I think I stopped the video to clarify that it was not referring to the current Never Ends, because to my knowledge, I don't think any of them were on the ESMB at that time, and the time that I'm talking about is kind of a earlier, 2013 to 2015. So it was kind of not a hidden resource, but people would go in there and read more than they would post. But some of the people that would post would do as I described, where they'd be like, yeah, that's a cool story, and you did some fucked up shit. I would never do that. It's like, okay, thanks for your comment.
The ruse that you fall for is it's so sick. It's so sick because it preys on people who really genuinely want to make the world a better place. I mean, there are those, even in missions and orgs, that for one reason or another, even though they don't get paid well or they're not in the executive branch and thus can't guarantee their income, there are people who are in Scientology seemingly because they get to have authority over people and make them do things. So there's a mix. There's a mix of both. There's the people that truly believe that, in the statement of Scientology, a world without criminality, hold on, I'll pull that up because this is important for what I'm talking about. And that's an interesting word to use. Criminality, a world without criminality. Scientology. There we go. a world without war. Crime and insanity. The mechanism by which Scientology plans to achieve this goal is by the process of clearing.
So, noble goal. In my 20s, I felt like a sort of a outcast revolutionary, last stand kind of dude. Me and 3 of my friends went on the road. We knew the digital age was coming. And, there was nothing, I wouldn't say that we predicted, but we did see that a certain way of life was coming to an end. We all saw that, and we wanted to experience being on the road the old way, where it's, a group of kindred spirits playing music with an atlas, many times without cell service, and navigating the path that we had plotted, which was South Central United States. And I was idealistic. I definitely was, I'm a huge John Lennon fan. I believed in his message. I believe in the power of music to change the world. And I know that sounds extreme, but I feel like I've seen it before. Music changing the world. And anything that I can contribute, because it can change the whole world, or it can change a person's world, or it can change, there's different magnitudes. But some songs seem to have changed in a fundamental way, the way people think, or the way people feel. Whether it's joy or reflection or grief, whatever it is, it has that power. And I sincerely believe that I could use technology of Scientology. Once I got to that point where I believed it, that I could combine the two. Yeah. Imagine all the people.
Clearing the planet, which will be explained more. This is Operation
Living life in peace. You know, that seemed a lot to me like Lenin's message. Imagine there is no heaven. You know, imagine no hell, you know, no hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living life in peace, living for today. I very much identify with that song, and I think "Imagine" is probably one of the best examples that I can think of a song that changed the world. And it may not be in this massive way, but it changed. It was big enough, the message was strong enough, and the music was gentle enough for everyone, and soft enough. What I mean by that is the softest thing overcomes the hardest things. You know, water can get between rocks and tiny, tiny little spaces. And Imagine, I feel, made a worldwide impact in some ways. In what ways exactly? I don't know. But the point being is that a single thought, a single series of thoughts, which, by the way, and most of Imagine, if not all of it, was written by Yoko Ono. And there may be people find that very hard to accept. But if you read his biography, Double Fantasy and Imagine, and the album before that, there were 2 albums she had immense lyrical input on, and it was profound. I believe this is why John Lennon was so in love with her, to a point to where people were like, "You're crazy. You're letting her take over everything, your life, the Beatles, all of it." Mock says, "Let's just see the human being first is technically not a revolutionary idea." Is that a quote from something? I love that. That seems like a quote from Hitchhiker's Guide or something.
Clam Bake, A World Without. And then I think that comes from the reference, A World Without Scientology. There's a lot of good information on Operation Clambake, which is xenu.net. Or no, I'm sorry, totally different sites. I think they just attribute it to this other site. So xenu.net /archive/world_without. That's what I'm looking at. It's a really, really good article. It's not short. It's a very long article to read, but if you just Google xenu.net A World Without, then you should be able to find it.
Tell it like it is, Mock.
It's simply too much for me to go over, but I wanted to quote that from the World Without Scientology reference.
I really like these gatherings. I don't know if this is like up to date, but it says 5 concurrent viewers. I prefer, not that I don't like big active chats. They're fun. I tend to cut up more. If you saw any of the streams Doug and I did, sometimes I would just straight up be cutting up. But I like the personal connections in smaller format things. I've always kind of had a preference for that anyway. I keep a kind of a tight, small, close group of friends.
So you got two different types, really. It's like it's strange. It's almost like polar opposite type personalities. John, like one of the guys that I worked with, seemed to really like to take charge and dominate. Whether it was on a book selling thing or a registration cycle or building the mission in Melrose. He's gung ho all the time, and the executives like that. The executives love that. They like someone to push the staff and be a motivating force. And when I say motivating, I mean punitively motivating. If you do not perform, you're punished in some form or another.
A lot of times, speaking of John, the punishment wouldn't necessarily be busy work or what they call missed work, which is hard labor. It would be social, like embarrassment, shaming, not applying the tech, calling out in front of other staff members that you're not applying the tech and that you're in a lower condition, stuff like that. When you declare someone in like a social setting in Scientology publicly in front of other executives and staff, like publicly you say you're in lowers or you're in danger or you're in treason, it's a shameful moment. Mind My Blues says, I remember a live concert, small club, punk rock, 9 people were in the audience, best concert ever. And one for one almost, if you ask any of the celebrities that, play stadiums and stuff, like their favorite show, it'll almost invariably be some random show somewhere where there was very few people and just everyone was into that vibe. Everyone was on the same page. It's kind of like, I guess, raves or something minus the ecstasy or whatever. And that's another good point Mind My Blues makes. The band gave everything and more. The stakes are so low, like that people tend to take more chances, and when you're playing for a larger amount of people, there's a tendency in some to play it safe. When you play it safe, you don't always get the raw performances that you'll get whenever someone feels like, to hell with it, I'll go for it. They might go for that riff or that, or even something. I've played guitar before, and I'm just going to do something, and I don't even know what, and it's just pure feeling, and somehow the audience can sense that and feel that, and so those are most everyone I know, including myself, some of the best shows were for small crowds, because of the intimacy aspect. Everyone feels that they are part of it. Yeah. All right.
When we were finishing up the Melrose mission before the main event, we literally finished it days before the event. Maybe 2 days before the event, because we were there 24/7, 8 people. And John Jones would wake us up. We'd be working all day, but then when we go to
fire drill time,
sleep at like 2, 3 in the morning, we're tired. We're sleeping on carpet, for a while there we were just sleeping outside on insulation, a balcony. But once we got all the things inside built, course room built, and auditing rooms built, and all that stuff, we were sleeping in the ED's office on sleeping bags, or when we got carpet, we slept on the carpet or in sleeping bags on the carpet. But John Jones would come and ring a bell, ding, 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 or a horn. He had a horn. He drenched us with water. And this was like Sea Org type behavior, I forget what he called. Oh yeah, watch quarter station bill. So like he'd get us up just to be ready to do nothing. Like, get up, we got something to do. We got
nothing to do. WQSB was some obscure reference from the admin dictionary, and it was taken from the Navy. Something that I'm not even sure is used anymore. Blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter. Point is, fire drill, get splashed with water, wake up to do absolutely nothing, and then go back to sleep. I mean, this is like Ash/Milgram territory where you are physically conditioning people. It's the same thing you have in buds, same thing you would have in certain military training and basic training to condition a person.
Cycle we need to do.
And welcome, Herbster. Yeah, I'm sure you see my question. I would like an answer so that I could throw something up if you would like to network the music.
And this would be after an hour maybe of sleeping, 2 hours. Just when you get to sleep, they wake you up. Muster, essentially, is a muster. Part of sleep deprivation, part of keeping people in line and controllable. So, there's that type of person. And those are the people that I don't necessarily think realize how... I don't think they realize a lot of things, really. But most of all, like, I don't think that they were always sincere in clearing the planet or helping people. Let's just say helping people.
Varied case by case. There are really people, who believe they're helping, just like every other religion. So, case by case basis.
Of course, these people would talk about pre-clears, like people at the missions or orgs, as if they were pieces of harvestable money, like in the meetings, the executives or those types of people would talk about any kind of assets that could be obtained, and converted into cash and donated, and then they would scheme up a way to sell a product to the individual that they're talking about.
Now, this has to be no doubt one of the videos that Doug watched at a certain point and had to have, I can't imagine it not triggering things for him, because knowing that at this point, I don't think he would have known that his family would have been targeted, but just knowing that that was the procedure would have given him a pointer in that direction, that, whoa, my dad was targeted, my mom was targeted, I was targeted, it was all targeted. And, it's just, I can't imagine hearing that after 30 years. It's crazy.
So, and they go through the list of everyone that's on lines. What's the term that means anyone who's a public Scientologist at that mission. So anyone who's online, you go through a list and you figure out how much you can extract from them by use of mental coercion and hypnosis, whatever. Just depends on how well they're hypnotized.
Are you knocking?
As to how much they'll give. But all gave some gave all. Horrible parallel there, but it's true. So back to the fundamental attribution error. The Scientologists are stupid because they're falling for this stupid cult. On the other side of the coin, the people who were there.
So just like the driver who's cutting someone off, it's like, oh, you're such an idiot. You know, you're being a Scientologist. Oh, you're such an idiot. I'm talking about fundamental attribution error now in both senses. The fundamental attribution error that, oh, you're a Scientologist, you're stupid. And the fundamental attribution errors of the Scientologists, which we'll get into, because this is a short video and then a short sort of rundown of how it relates to the biases that I discussed yesterday and all of these compound biases that occur. It's very easy to see how these belief systems get so spiderwebby, for lack of a better word.
Based on this concept of a world without war, crime, and insanity. That is a very ambitious statement. And you might think that someone who would support a cause like that would have the sense to know that Scientology would not be the way to do it. Unfortunately, there are many effective means that Scientology has at its disposal, which are psychological in nature.
Which we covered in a lot of Doug's stuff. And I'm so glad that we did it. I'm very proud of that work. It's the Dazed But Not Confused channel, the Backflash Friday stuff that we did, 16 broadcasts. And, you know, our stated goal at the beginning was to try to show as much as we could of as the full scope of the bridge as possible, from the beginning to the near end.
And anyone can actually fall prey to it. It just depends on what particular state of mind you're in at the time, and are they able to identify it and draw you in with how they have to be skilled. They have to kind of
need to be competent socially, need to be able to communicate, need to have their little communication drills down, need to have all of their little stuff drilled, dissemination drill, contact salvage, bring to understanding, flatten buttons on help, all these things that, are derived from psychological research.
Be skilled at communication.
This is a pseudo-psychological or pseudo-science, Scientology.
But I've seen, the whole gamut of types of people. Like I said, we had actually, I think the video got cut off earlier. I didn't talk about Harvey at the Buenaventura mission, but Harvey, he had some mental disability, and there were people with mental disabilities at the pack base. And so in those cases,
pack base is the big blue building.
It's not their fault. I mean, it's just sad, honestly. In many cases, they just needed some place to go, and they didn't have family to care for them. So they ended up there, and they're essentially, slaves. They don't get to do much. Harvey would clean everything. He was the janitor, and they would also ensure that he would go on course because they wanted him to. I mean, it was relatively easy because, and I don't mean to be derogatory here, but he had a mental disorder that his mental faculties were not what were they were far below normal.
Now, I don't know what his diagnosis was, and this is just speculation. There was also a very Zen type thing with Harvey, because I don't think Harvey had any family, and I don't think Harvey had anyone, or he had lost everyone. And like Aaron was saying yesterday, many Scientologists will say, "Oh, if it wasn't for Scientology, I'd be dead in the gutter. If it wasn't for Scientology, I'd be broke in an alley," or whatever. They give great praise and almost sole responsibility of their successes of any kind to Scientology, not themselves. And everything being on a sliding scale, it's very possible that Harvey felt that, hey, I have a place to live, I have some money, and all I have to do is clean. And that could have been that could have been a very positive thing for him. And the only negative thing would have been going on a course and getting harassed about misunderstood words, which he would get frustrated about. Understandably so. I did too. Everybody did.
Far below normal. And it made him very easy to manipulate. He was a very kind person. He was a very, very nice person.
And looking back now, who's to say that Harvey wasn't the one manipulating the organization? I don't know what Harvey got paid. He could have been paid a regular wage, for all I know.
You have people who are intelligent that go for this stuff, that they look at that and they see a world without war, crime, and insanity. And if you have had a substantial, they call them wins in Scientology, but if you've had a substantial change of a belief, in other words, whenever something seems to have worked for you, and you feel like a relief from something, say for instance, someone comes in and had been raped, and they go into an auditing session, and they talk about the rape, and they go through every detail.
So yeah, trigger warning, obviously.
Over and over and over and over and over and over again until there's no charge left on it. They call it charge, but that's therapy. When I went to therapy for PTSD,
The qualifying statement here, there are modes of therapy that are very similar to some modes of auditing. One of them being EMDR, where you go to an earlier similar, recall as much detail as you can, earlier similar. It's almost literally the same thing. I'm still asking lots of questions to my therapist, who has a license and is getting further training on EMDR, but I find it freaking disturbing and fascinating at the same time that these processes are so similar.
I got diagnosed in 2015. Essentially, that's what we did. We talked about the incident until it didn't have any like emotional control over me anymore, or at least a great deal lessened. And
a lot of that therapy at that time was the beginning of sort of unraveling the family trauma and the fact that coercive control was, of Scientology was preceded by coercive control in a family domestic violence type situation, which I had never really considered. And so the triggers started to become less and less triggering.
From post-traumatic stress, you learn to have growth, because you can't undo trauma. Like when you have trauma, generally it'll affect your whole body, whether it's a wreck or being shot at, or whether it's physical or mental, is what I'm saying. Because there are certain mental traumas that will affect your
the hell did it
neurochemistry in your body, and the way that you think about things.
Okay.
Someone being raped, they generally have trust issues. Someone being shot at is nervous a lot. Has a lot of nerve problems, or antsy all the time. The type of people who are a lot of times very active and outgoing in life. People with PTSD. There's all kinds of really brilliant people who have and motivated people who have had very troubled pasts. Elon Musk was thrown down a flight of stairs when he was a kid. Changed him forever. Now he's making spaceships. And all I'm saying is that the fundamental attribution error, and my thoughts on that as it relates and pertains to Scientology, is that I really wish the fundamental attribution error was not that people who are in Scientology are stupid. But I can wish in one hand and piss in the other and see which one fills up, is what my dad always used to say. Because I just don't see it happening that way. Just like unless there's a tragedy. Unless there's a tragedy like the Jim Jones cult, or the Heaven's Gate cult. Some people are sympathetic and some people are like, you stupid. It's always going to be that way. Even if there is a tragedy, there's going to be some people like, yeah, well, they got what they deserved for joining a stupid cult. But having been in a cult, and I've watched the Marshall Applewhite videos.
Destructive culture, coercive culture. You guys probably know by now what I mean when I say cult.
And I get it, and maybe, I in my very first video, seemed like the most popular video that I have. So I'm talking about that feeling of feeling completely stupid for having been a part of it. And at that time, I still felt that way. But that is fundamental attribution error in Scientology for a lot of people, is that they think that anyone involved with it or is in it is stupid. And I disagree with that. And I think that'll pretty much cover that.
So, that doesn't really cover it, because fundamental attribution error, let's see here. I got my fancy tab stuff. All right. So, just some other resources before we wrap up. Oh, look, 2017. The Fundamental Attribution Error, what it is and how to avoid it. There's been a lot of written about cognitive biases in the last decade. If you walk into the psychology section of Barnes & Noble today or browse Amazon for decision making, you're sure to see a library of books about how irrational humans can be. This is from the Harvard Business School online. Many cognitive biases affect humans in their everyday actions, like confirmation bias and overconfidence. But the most important and troubling error that professionals tend to make in their thinking may be the fundamental attribution error. Cognitive biases such as these often shape how an individual interacts with the world around them in the world of business, and understanding these biases and becoming aware of the ways that they influence your behavior is vital to becoming a better manager, or just manage yourself, you know. Free Xenu. Oh, Tish. Hey, Tish, what's happening? Xenu to you. And Free Xenu says, that is what aggravates me when people get down on people for joining a cult or culture. I'm going to say that. They are already feeling bad about doing it. Then they make stupid comments. Yeah. It's like someone drowning and you putting your foot on their head, or someone on the edge of a cliff and you're stepping on their fingers. It just isn't helpful. What is the fundamental attribution error? The fundamental attribution error refers to, again, this Harvard Business School online, refers to an individual's tendency to attribute another's actions to their character or personality, meaning that person. They're attributing their actions to their personality or character, while attributing their behavior to external situational factors outside of their control. In other words, you tend to cut yourself a break while holding others 100% accountable for their actions. For instance, if you've ever chastised a lazy employee, in quotes, for being late to a meeting and then proceeded to make an excuse for being late yourself that same day, you've made the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error exists because of how people perceive the world. While you have at least some idea of your character, motivations, and situational factors that affect your day-to-day, you rarely know everything that's going on with someone else. This should be obvious, but it's not always to people. Similar to confirmation and overconfidence biases, of which there are many we covered yesterday. There's like 8 different biases, and there's probably more. Its impact on business and life can be reduced by taking several measures. Fundamental attribution error examples. It's clear to see how fundamental attribution error can impact your personal life, but it's important to recognize the influence it can have on your work, and I would extend that to social life as well. Whether you're an employee or manager, cognitive biases like fundamental attribution error can play a role how you interact with others in the workplace and how you make key business decisions. In working with your colleagues, for example, you probably form a general impression of their character based on pieces of a situation, but never see the whole picture. While it would be nice to give them the benefit of the doubt, your brain tends to use limited information to make judgments. Within organizations, fundamental attribution error can cause everything from arguments to firings and ruptures in organizational culture. In fact, it's at the root of any misunderstanding in which human motivations have the potential to be misinterpreted. And that is a bold statement. In fact, I'm not saying this, Harvard Business School is saying this. In fact, it's at the root of any misunderstanding in which human motivations have the potential to be misinterpreted. For example, think back to the lazy employee. Since she was late to an important meeting, you might be inclined to form a judgment of her character based on this one action alone. And this goes to the primacy effect as well that I talked about yesterday. the first thing that you remember, first impressions. So based on this one action alone, if this person if it's a meeting, you're meeting them for the first time and they're late, this can affect your judgment of their character. It's possible, however, that her behavior is due to several external rather than internal factors. For instance, any number of situational factors could have caused her to run behind schedule, such as family emergency or traffic jam, or having, I'm just going to throw another one in here. She might have had to go to the ladies' room to take care of something, which have nothing to do with the quality of her character. In action, forming impressions of a person's character based on limited information can have long-lasting effects. Now that you perceive this person as lazy, in quotations, your opinions of her may begin to shift over time. Unless the opportunity arises for you to get to know your employee better, you may always view her in a negative light. And I'll go further to say that this is engineered and manufactured in some cases by people who have sociopathic tendencies, whether diagnosed or not, because you don't necessarily have to be a full-blown sociopath to have a tendency to do something sociopathic. Same with psycho behavior. Psychosis will usually happen to a person within their life, at least once. And, if there's others around you that know how to, push your buttons and pull your strings, then they can take advantage of a situation where, exposure to you can create a fundamental attribution error for someone else and build a group bias, more biases, and again, nerding out on intelligence. This is the part of tradecraft that, they say you don't talk about tradecraft. I don't know why that is a rule, but this is how you manipulate things without even touching them, so that you're not culpable at all. How to avoid the fundamental attribution error. Think of the last time you thought a coworker should be fired or a customer service rep was incompetent. How often have you really tried to understand the situational factors that could be affecting this person's work? Probably not often. Okay, that's an assumption. Maybe people do think about that. Maybe you think about that. Maybe I think about that. But it says probably not often. The fundamental attribution error is so prevalent because it's rooted in psychology. So completely overcoming it can be difficult. One tool that can be helpful in combating fundamental attribution error is gratitude. When you become resentful at someone for a bad, quote, quality they demonstrate, try to make a list of 5 positive qualities the person also exhibits. This will help balance out your perspective and help you view your coworker as a whole person instead of through the lens of a single negative quality. Naturism at Clearwater Beach says, it is easier kicking down, and that sucks. But we are all humans, born to make mistakes, and sometimes learn something, hopefully. Yeah. I mean, it's not... subjective reality almost forces this to happen, because we all have our realities and everyone is valid. So I don't, hopefully we learn something from it, but you're right. We're going to make mistakes. We're human beings. Free Xenu Project, I call those people who manipulate in the workplace ripple makers. They throw a rock and back off and watch the ripples and sit back and laugh. Sociopathic behavior. Indeed. And they don't have to be a full-blown sociopath to do it either. I mean, kids do this in the schoolyard, right? So, look back at your own childhood and schooling, and you could probably find some examples if you look. Another method is to practice becoming more emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence has become a buzzword in the business world over the past 20 to 30 years, but it involves practicing self-awareness, empathy, self-regulation, and other methods of becoming more objective in the service of one's long-term interests and the interests of others, which ultimately, in my opinion, is in your best interest. Practicing empathy in particular, such as having discussions with coworkers about their opinions on projects and life out of the office, is a good first step. Some people are not comfortable with that, I found. They just, it's strictly business. And, that may be due to the industries that I've worked in. Because some of us need to know, and some of it's just like weird artists that have their weird things, and you get together and you make something, and then that's it. But fundamental attribution error is impossible to overcome completely. I think I kind of said that earlier. It's unavoidable. But with a combination of awareness and a few small tools, also naturism said that. We're born to make mistakes. A few small tools and tactics, you can become more gracious and empathic with your coworkers. And again, it expands past that, obviously. In fact, being able to acknowledge cognitive biases like fundamental attribution error and make the conscious effort to limit their effects is an essential component of becoming a better manager, i.e. friend, i.e. family member, i.e. person. All right? So that's that. Attribution bias. In psychology, attribution bias or attributional bias is a cognitive bias that refers to the systematic errors made when people evaluate or try to find reasons for their own and others' behaviors. People constantly make attributions, judgments, and assumptions about why people behave in certain ways. However, attributions do not always accurately reflect reality. Rather than operating as objective perceivers, people are prone to perceptual errors that lead to biased interpretations of their social world. Attribution biases are present in everyday life. For example, and they give the same example that I gave. When a driver cuts someone off, the person who has been cut off is more likely to attribute blame to reckless drivers' inherent personality traits, exempli grati, that driver is rude and incompetent, rather than situational circumstances, exempli grati, that driver may have been late to work and not paying attention. Additionally, there may be many different types of attribution biases, such as the ultimate attribution error, which is a type of attribution error that describes how attributions of out-group behavior are more negative than in-group behavior. Us versus them. Catholics versus Baptists. Scientologists versus Mormons. French versus Americans. Natives versus French. Canadians versus themselves. I don't know. That divisive mechanism that's built into everybody. Out-group and in-group. As a cognitive bias, the error results in a negative out-group behavior being more likely to be attributed to factors internal and specific to the actor or person, such as personality, and the attribution of negative in-group behavior to external factors, such as luck or circumstance. In other words, if something, and this was very prevalent in Scientology, if you saw in the out-group in this case, is the infernal, horrible, racist slur WOG, all right? That's the out-group. But if there's somebody in that out-group that is excelling tremendously in life or whatever, it can be attributed to something else that relates to the in-group. So this theory also extends to the bias that positive acts performed by in-group members are more likely a result of their personality. Conversely, if someone is having a lot of success in the in-group, it is attributed to their own, instead of external factors, internal factors. They have good ethics. They are in good standing. They are going up the bridge, etc. They went to communion. They go to church every Sunday. They donate this much tithing. 4 categories have been identified that people, 4 categories have been identified that describe the negative attribution of positive outgroup behavior. First, that the outgroup member is an exception to the general rule. Kind of already covered that. Second, that the member was lucky or had specific advantages. Or third, that the member was highly motivated. And lastly, that the behavior is attributable to situational cases. I think it's a combination of all 4, yeah. The concept and origin originates in an article by Thomas P. Pettigrew, who was a social psychologist, in 1979 as an extension to the fundamental attribution error, which was identified in 1958. Since its publication, which at the time lacked strong empirical basis, there has been some support for the theory. The specific categorization originally proposed had only some empirical support for broader categories of motivational and cognitive attribution. The bias is related to intergroup attribution bias, which is in-group favoritism, also known as in-group, out-group bias. More bias, you know. All right, so that's the ultimate attribution error. From attribution bias, from fundamental attribution error, and just locus of control is the degree to which people believe that they, as opposed to external forces beyond their influence, have control over the events in their lives. The concept was developed by Julian B. Rotter in 1954, who was a psychologist, and has since been and become an aspect of personality psychology. A person's locus, plural for loci, Latin for place or location, is conceptualized as internal, a belief that one can control one's own life, or external, a belief that life is controlled by outside factors which a person cannot influence, or that chance or fate controls their lives. Individuals with a strong internal locus of control believe events in their life are primarily a result of their own actions. For example, when receiving exam results, people with an internal locus of control tend to praise or blame themselves and their abilities. People with a strong external locus of control tend to praise or blame external factors such as the teacher or the difficulty of the exam. Locus of control has generated much research in a variety of areas of psychology. The construct is applicable to such fields as educational psychology, health psychology, industrial and organizational psychology, and clinical psychology. Debate continues whether domain-specific or global measures of locus of control will prove to be more useful in practical application. Careful distinctions should also be made between locus of control, a personality variable linked with generalized expectancies about the future, and attributional style, a concept concerning explanations for past outcomes. Or between locus of control and concepts such as self-efficacy, which in psychology, self-efficacy is an individual's belief in their capacity to act in ways necessary to reach specific goals. Concept was originally proposed by psychologist Albert Bandura. And final paragraph here, locus of control is one of the 4 dimensions of core self-evaluations, which represent a stable personality trait which encompasses an individual's subconscious, fundamental evaluations about themselves, their own abilities, and their own control. So the concept of core self-evaluations was first examined by Judge Locke and Durham in 1997 and has since proven the ability to predict several work outcomes, specifically job satisfaction and job performance. In a follow-up study, Judge I don't know that Latin, argued that locus of control, neuroticism, self-efficacy, and self-esteem factors may have a common core. All right. Another reference here. Simply Psychology, Fundamental Attribution Error in Psychology. Bullet point, the fundamental attribution error, also known as correspondence bias or over-attribution effect, is the tendency for people to overemphasize dispositional or personality-based explanations for behaviors observed in others while underemphasizing situational explanations. In other words, people have cognitive bias to assume that a person's actions depend on what kind, in quotations, of person that person is, rather than the social or environmental forces that influence the person. The term was coined by Lee Ross some years after the now classic experiment by Jones and Harris. Ross, in 1977, argued in a popular paper that the fundamental attribution error forms the conceptual bedrock for the field of social psychology. We tend to see others as internally motivated and responsible for their behavior. This could be because of perceptual salience. That is, the other person is what we see most of when we look at them, or it could be that we lack more detailed information about what causes their behavior. An example, perhaps the saddest example of the tendency to make internal attributions, whether they're warranted or not, is blaming the victim. Victim blaming. Again, fundamental attribution error. You're so stupid. You joined Scientology. You're an idiot. If giving someone our sympathy or blaming the true culprit somehow causes us dissonance, we may hold the victim responsible for his or her own pain and suffering. They had it coming. She was asking for it, are all too common phrases. Empirical evidence, 1967, Jones and Harris hypothesized that people would attribute apparently freely chosen behaviors to disposition, personality, and apparently chance-directed behaviors to a situation. The hypothesis was confounded by the fundamental attribution error. Participants listened to pro- and anti-Fidel Castro speeches. Participants were asked to rate the pro-Castro attitudes of the speakers. When subjects believed that the speakers freely chose the positions they took for or against Castro, they naturally rated the people who spoke in favor of Castro as having a more positive attitude towards Castro. Now, yesterday I talked about, news and, government. This is tradecraft, like this is how they get group confirmation bias or groupthink or, there's so many biases, right? This is how they change the bias. It's like metallurgy, but with the mind. So, however, contradicting Jones and Harris's initial hypothesis, when the participants were told that the speakers' positions were determined by a coin toss, they still rated speakers who spoke in favor of Castro as having, on average, a more positive attitude towards Castro than those who spoke against him. In other words, the participants were unable to see the speakers were mere debaters coldly performing a task chosen for them by circumstance, external factor. They could not refrain from attributing some disposition of sincerity to the speakers. And that's pretty wild. It's in the 70s. Critical evaluation. Fundamental attribution bias may not be universal across cultures. Being from a vast multicultural state, I've seen that in my life throughout all the different cultures that I experience here. While American children were found by Miller in 1984 as they grew older to place increasing reliance upon disposition as an explanation of events observed, Hindu children of India based their explanations more on situations. This finding is consistent with the theory that some countries, like the U.S., emphasize an individualistic self-concept raised in a society that places a premium on individual achievement and uniqueness. Americans seem to develop a tendency to focus on the characteristics of the individual in making attributions. All right, and I think this is the last one, is ethics. Let's watch this. Can't full screen. Okay.
Attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency people have to overemphasize personal characteristics and ignore situational factors in judging others' behavior. Because of the fundamental attribution error, we tend to believe that others do bad things because they are bad people. We're inclined to ignore situational factors that might have played a role. For instance, if someone cuts us off while driving, our first thought might be, "What a jerk," instead of considering the possibility that the driver is rushing someone to the airport. On the flip side, when we cut someone off in traffic, we tend to convince ourselves that we had to do so. We focus on situational factors, like being late to a meeting, and ignore what our behavior might say about our own character. For example, in one study, when something bad happened to someone else, subjects blamed that person's behavior or personality 65% of the time.
Wow, it's more than half.
But when something bad happened to the subjects, they blamed themselves only 44% of the time, blaming the situation they were in much more often. So, the fundamental attribution error explains why we often judge others harshly while letting ourselves off the hook at the same time by rationalizing our own unethical behavior.
So, takeaway there is, those aren't terrible numbers, 64%, 44%, or whatever it was. But, they could get better. It would be nice if they got better. So the fundamental attribution error, to beat a dead horse, is a tendency people have to overemphasize personal characteristics and ignore situational factors in judging others' behavior. Because of the fundamental attribution error, we tend to believe that others do bad things because they're bad people. We're inclined to ignore situational factors that might have played a role. The rest we've already covered many different ways. And yep, that's back into the stuff from yesterday. So that's it. Fundamental attribution error, and in a bit more detail. And there's just so many biases, right, that to be aware of. It's not like I'm saying I or anyone should be constantly thinking about, well, what bias am I thinking of? It's just something to consider, to think about, to spend a couple of, hours reading about, learning about, so that when a situation arises and you find yourself, thinking something about, like, for instance, somebody you love does something or says something that is hurtful, or feels inconsiderate, or rude. Like, maybe consider another subject instead of just your own personal subjective reality. Because everyone has a subjective reality, and we are all prone to mistakes, and we've all done things that we regret. And no regret, no rien de rien. Like, no regrets. Great song, but regret is actually a pretty important aspect because of the mind and experience, because by looking back at what you regret, you can see things that you will do differently in the future. In other words, the whole don't make the same mistake twice thing, and that's what that is, like, try not to make the same mistake twice. We'll roll out with some music, and I'm gonna eat something and probably go chill with the nerdy bunch, as they're calling themselves today. And maybe cut up in there. Where are we at here? Yeah, here we go. So, yeah, forgot to do this. I live on love. Living on love. I've been living on love for a long time. Only if you can. If you can help. So let's play Fundamental Attribution Error. Sort of like, making assumptions. Let's find a song that can sort of encapsulate that. Mama used to say. Maybe not. Nothing new. Fundamental attribution error. It's something that you did, not me. That person is an asshole, not me. Let's see. If you guys haven't checked out any of this, any of these records, I encourage you to do so. All of them, in my opinion, are like start to finish good records, if you know what I mean. Like, put the needle on the record and just let it play. I want to play something for my cousin Jesse. Yeah, let's do Switchback. I co-produced this record in 2014 with Brian Rocca Sr. in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And it's my cousin Jesse Taylor. This whole album, Take It As I Leave It, was written by her when she was in her teens. It's absolutely incredible album. Highly recommend it. She's got a great voice. I'm featured on a few of the songs. This one I play guitar in. And that's what I will leave with, and then we'll roll the outro. And thanks everybody for coming. Let me look at the comments real quick. Yeah, Freezy knew exactly that behavior was nurtured in them. And it is nurtured in society and at large, to one degree or another. Naturism at Clearwater. Oh, that's a response to them. Okay. That Buy Me a Coffee doesn't work. Use the one on your description. Oh, really? Interesting. Browser source. Oh, you're right. That was a different. That's a button. Shit, I don't know how. Website widget? No. View page. This would be the link. Okay. Is that to me, FXP? Oh, Freezy New Project. Okay. There's the correct link. And here is off of Take It As I Leave It by my cousin Jesse Taylor. Switchback. It's the last track on her album. And I will mute myself and we will enjoy the music and I will chat for the remainder. You guys have a great Saturday. I know this was a heavy topic for the morning. So maybe, people who are rewatching it later, like, brain will be awake enough to compute. I don't know. Some of it was a little hard for me too. I was drinking coffee, trying to get my blood flow happening in my brain. All right, camera off. Xenu on. Wow. And mute the mic.
Switch back to the switchback, headed down the wrong track. Wanting to be free again, so I need you to pick up my slack. I ain't know much about direction, ain't know much about life. Come on, Lord, take me by the hand this time. I wanna get it right, 'cause I want to be happy and I wanna be free. And I'm tired of these strongholds holding on me. Said I want to be happy and I wanna be free. So show me what it means to be found. Lead me on to the road, going to eternal life. I've been down other avenues and I know there's only one that's right. I don't care much about the details, I'm throwing away the dice. Come on now, take me by the hand this time. I wanna get it right, 'cause I want to be happy, I wanna be free. And I'm tired of these strongholds holding on me. Oh, I want to be happy, I wanna be free. So show me what it means to be found. Show me what it means to be found. Show me what it means to be found. Show me what it means to take everything I know and flip it upside down. Show me what it means to be found. Show me what it means to be found. Show me how it feels to take everything I own and flip it upside down. Show me what it means to be found. Switch back to the switchback, headed down the wrong track.